Coming up, someone's apparently at least a little bit skeptical of Alabama. We'll tell you about that, and we'll celebrate some good news for LSU. It's all on the way next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello everyone and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad you're with us. We'll talk about the SEC here for the next 60 minutes. And Les Miles, by the way, going to make another triumphant appearance in today's show. This time, another, I'm going to suggest, fairly volatile statement. Volatile may be the wrong word. Certainly provocative, though. Miles has done a few of those here lately.
Yeah, there's going to be LSU heavy, too, because obviously the news of Derrick Stingley coming out a minute ago, and I think it's a huge win for LSU, so it should be fun to dive into.
Before we do that, let's start with the Alabama Crimson Tide here off the top of the program. Item number 1 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Paul Meyerberg is a writer for USAtoday.com, and he comes up with his ranks of most likely conference champions here for the upcoming season. And while Alabama is virtually seen as the favorite everywhere in the betting circles, we'll have more on that later on, over-under totals, national championship odds, according to Paul Meyerberg from USA Today, not the most likely conference champion here in 2018. Yeah. I guess, Mike, I would ask you by way of a question here, is this more of a statement about the strength of the SEC or reason for skepticism when it comes to the Alabama Crimson Tide?
I think this has everything to do with Georgia, Auburn, LSU, whatever team you want to name that you possibly could think that could possibly get to the top of the SEC. Because, listen, we saw it last year. Bama was the national champions. They didn't win the SEC. And so I think that kind of really frames the way a lot of people are looking at this upcoming conference schedule, the upcoming SEC schedule. I think everybody has all the faith in the world in the talent level that's in Tuscaloosa, but you can't have all the faith. This is not the defending national champions. That's the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, the SEC champions. That's the Georgia Bulldogs. Yeah. So I think when you bring all that things together, there's just many more questions about the humps that Alabama has to go over.
In fact, Alabama's actually ranked 6th on Paul Meyerberg's list from USA Today. What he writes is winning the SEC isn't a prerequisite for winning the national title, as the Tide have illustrated a few times under Nick Saban, and the SEC West will again be a hassle. I actually like that word. It's a great description of the West. He goes on to say not just Auburn there to defend its division, but Mississippi State, a likely second half factor should LSU fail to crack more than 7 wins during the regular season. Oh, and there's Georgia in the East to contend with, though the Bulldogs have a few question marks to answer on both sides of the ball. So here's where I'll kind of like play devil's advocate and just defend the Alabama point of this. Yes, the SEC West is very good. The SEC overall, I would think, would be categorized as a pretty deep league, and yet you and I talk all the time about the ease of Alabama's schedule. The fact that Alabama's going to be a huge favorite. I mean, he mentions Mississippi State by name. Alabama's a 2-touchdown favorite against Mississippi State. Yeah. I mean, even LSU on the road in Baton Rouge, that's a place where Alabama has it's won games, but not necessarily won them easily. Alabama's a big favorite even in Death Valley, with all due respect to Tigers fans. Auburn beat Alabama a year ago, but in Bryant-Denny Stadium to close out the regular season. Once again, you're talking about Alabama being a big favorite. So it is a bit trying to have your cake and eat it too, to say, oh, Alabama's maybe not the easiest path to a conference championship of some of the other top contenders in college football when, because of the strength of the SEC, but even in a strong SEC, everybody else but Georgia, I would say Alabama stands head and shoulders above.
Well, and that's what's funny. This is almost a role reversal because I think that Georgia has everything to do with this.
I told you I was playing devil's advocate.
No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that Georgia has everything to do with what George Schroeder's trying to say here on USA Today is, listen, this is not a Clemson that's a down Florida State. You know, Miami, what are you really getting under Mark Richt there in year 3? Louisville, Lamar Jackson's gone. What is NC State going to do with some of this? The Clemson road, and Clemson is number 1 in this poll, the Clemson road to the conference championship is just smoother. I mean, yeah. I think if everything is to be believed about Kirby Smart and Georgia and the talent level they have coming in this season, then you have to believe that they're going to be a hurdle for Alabama to win the conference championship.
And along those lines, let me read you just quickly here what Meyerberg says about Clemson. It's not as if the ACC is a weak league, far from it. It's just that Clemson, even with a slight quarterback competition still underway, looks like the class of the conference on both sides of the ball. The Tigers are a step ahead of Florida State in the Atlantic Division. Miami's a threat coming out of the Coastal. But despite the program's growth under Mark Richt, it's too soon to expect the Hurricanes to unseat Dabo Swinney. So obviously that's the point you make there, that the gap between Clemson and the rest of the ACC seems greater than the gap between Alabama and the rest of the SEC, especially Georgia, who, I mean, in some circles could be considered the SEC favorite because of the fact of the reigning conference champion here. However, for a lot of people, they are going to turn something like this into a Alabama-Clemson comparison.
Right.
It's a list where Alabama's 6th, Clemson's 1st. These teams have played, 3 years in a row in the college football playoff? So some people are going to turn this into that Alabama-Clemson comparison. And from that standpoint, I think it is where some Tide fans will eyes perk up. Wait a second. I don't care what the list is.
Right.
Tide fans don't want to be ranked below Clemson on it.
No, and I think that's understandable. And I think that, listen, I do think it's interesting. The one thing that was a little bit of a head turner for me is that George Schroeder just glazes over the quarterback competition.
Paul Meyerberg, by the way.
Paul Meyerberg,
yeah.
I'm sorry. So, he just kind of glazes over the quarterback competition. Boy, Trevor Lawrence and Kelly Bryant, I think that's kind of a big deal. I think it's a big deal at Alabama, but I think it's probably a bigger deal at Clemson than it is in Alabama.
Well, I think that in some respects it may be similar to Alabama in that, Bryant is a fine quarterback for Clemson, but they're about to get a massive upgrade. Trevor Lawrence is just going to be really good.
But I think the difference is, for me, Trevor Lawrence is a true freshman. Anytime you're going to battle trying to win a conference championship with a true freshman the entire year, that's what kind of sets up to be a little bit different than what I think
that Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in the ACC right now.
That's going to be very hard to argue
right now.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with. The Florida State guys, DeAndre Francois coming back might have something to say, but that's very hard to point out.
What is funny about this, though, is this sort of way that Alabama and Clemson showing up on the same list, kind of getting tied up with each other here again. I mean, this is the thing that Dabo Swinney joked about going back to January, or really the end of December, when Alabama and Clemson were both in the college football playoff again, when his vote got made public in the coaches poll where he had ranked Ohio State ahead of Alabama. He sort of joked about this being his way of trying to get rid of the Crimson Tide, and it's a laugh line because everybody knows how intertwined these two programs, these two coaches are right now, Saban and Swinney. In fact, here is Dabo Swinney with a line that got a big humorous laugh back during the college football playoff press conference. Take a listen.
You want the honest answer? 3 o'clock in the morning on a bus ride home from Charlotte, a moment of insanity. Complete insanity. It literally was 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, oh, man, I got to do this poll. And looking at it, they won 11 games. Alabama won 11 games. They won the Big Ten championship. And obviously the committee has a lot of things to look at and a lot of data, and they're going to pick the 4 best teams however they see it. At that moment, that's the way I voted. But they're all great teams, man.
Okay, we'll go back in the middle.
He was just respecting his alma mater, that's all.
I'm trying to get rid of him. I can't get rid of him. Can't shake him.
And conversations like this show that the joke from Dabo Swinney there, another example of that. You're not going to be able to shake the Clemson-Alabama comparisons on lists like this, conversations like the one we have every single day there. And I guess in a way it's kind of cool to see Dabo Swinney able to laugh about it.
No, I think so too. And it's funny to see Nick Saban crack a joke about it too.
Yeah,
it's
actually, Saban, credit to him.
Yeah, he's a little bit funnier about it too.
He woke up from his nap long enough to have a joke. All right,
yeah, no, I just to finish the conversation, I do think there's a little bit, and Bradley Fail kind of mentions this over in the YouTube comment section. He says, is this wishful thinking by everybody that Bama isn't going to be as dominant? There's a little bit of that to that.
Wolf Walden also kind of saying a similar thing over here on Facebook. Of course the media is skeptical, much like we've been hearing for years, the quote, the dynasty is over. Then they win multiple titles, roll tide. So as a, I guess, media member here, the one thing I will admit is I do think there's a bias against Alabama. Not because people hate Alabama or Nick Saban in particular. I just think that Alabama's boring. Not boring to watch, but boring in terms of rubber stamp, the same team in the college football playoff every single year. The media, most of them would never admit this, but the media gets tired of writing the same story over and over, covering the same story. Alabama fans suspect this a bit. It doesn't lead to adversarial coverage, I don't think, or anything along those lines. But would the media prefer a 14 playoff at the end of the season to not include Alabama? There is no doubt in my mind.
No doubt.
Most media members would prefer Alabama not be there.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I understand it. That's why I don't get up in arms about some of the articles that are written about Alabama, because it's like, hey, listen, 10 years ago, it's, hey, could Nick Saban be one of the best coaches in college football? Then it is Nick Saban the best coach in college football? Is Nick Saban the best coach in college football history? And then it keeps spinning on, and it gets tired. It gets, Lord knows I'm as big a Bama fan as there is, but it grows tiresome for everybody.
Jeremy Pettis says, stop crying when Alabama's the champs, #1 recruiting, pick to repeat. We talk about them first and most. That's obviously a response. I mentioned the media members being tired of the Alabama Crimson Tide. It's also a daily occurrence that people in our comment section get tired of Alabama.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about it. They're going to be a big story. They're going to continue to be a big story, but a lot of these other teams are going in the right direction too.
Jazz Hatcher also says they're trying to pique interest because Alabama's going to be so dominant again. I mean, I've told you that before. I mean, the one thing I try to be on this show is as candid as I can possibly be. I don't want a boring season either. I don't want this to be the Golden State Warriors of college football where Alabama's winning against Ole Miss by 21 points, 17 points against Mississippi State, going to Baton Rouge and winning against LSU by double digits. I mean, I've got a favorite team. That's who I cheer for. I don't really cheer against any of the other SEC teams necessarily. But I don't want to see Alabama just coast through this thing.
Yeah, no, and I don't want people to get this conversation twisted when we're talking about it. I don't think either one of us, especially not me, and I don't think you are either, knocking on Alabama saying it's boring.
No.
It's more of a compliment to say, hey, listen, you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
You know what you're going to get when Nick Saban takes the field. It's like, hey, Tua or Jalen.
Totally.
Does it matter for 11 of the 12 games? I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I would love nothing more than for Nick Saban to be facing a big-time strategic decision. Do I play Jalen Hurts? Do I play Tua Tagovailoa? In most of the 12 regular season games, Saban could flip a coin and probably be just fine. All right, we'll talk more Alabama later on. For now, let's move on to item number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. And we foreshadowed this yesterday. Derrick Stingley, the 5-star cornerback, making his college decision. It was expected to come out right before our show, and right on schedule indeed. Derrick Stingley has done this. Go to his Twitter feed. I believe it's at Stingley Jr. or Junior. I think it's at Junior Stingley on Twitter. You can see the full video. We're going to show you part of it here. 5-star cornerback, native of Louisiana, and you know what? He did like Louisianans at least think their native sons are supposed to do. You see the LSU gear there. As he makes his decision to play his college ball here at LSU, you and I both, this is almost a topic we can't even debate because we are so of the same mind on this. It is just so hugely important for LSU to get a big name, big-time recruit, lock down the state of Louisiana. Too many kids have left Louisiana to go to Alabama in recent years. This is about as big and about as good a news as LSU can get in mid-June.
The word that I keep coming up with is imperative. It is absolutely imperative.
It's a bigger word than I hear you use normally.
I know.
Pretty impressive.
My vocabulary's not that big. That's why I wanted to make sure I shine some light on the word imperative.
I didn't notice.
It's imperative that Ed Orgeron gets guys like this. Derrick Stingley automatically is the number 1 player in this class, right, for LSU. And this is not like a hesitant thing. Look how comfortable in this video he is, showing that video on his Twitter account saying, listen, this is where I felt at home. And look, I got to go out on a limb here and talk about this for a second. How many guys have I got on here and crushed about these videos and these hat selections and going over the edge? I love the way Derrick Stingley did this. I thought it was refined. I thought he was comfortable. I thought he didn't try to do anything outlandish. He put a video up of some of his highlights. He highlights his high school and he says, you know what? Baton Rouge is home for me, and that's why I'm comfortable. Absolute home run for Ed Orgeron, absolute home run for LSU. This is one of the best off-season pieces of news that LSU fans have gotten in a while, aside from Joe Burrows. He's the number 1 recruit in your class right now, and it is something to be celebrated. They jumped from 15th to 10th, already in the top 10 for 247 ranking.
We've actually got some breaking news here that I'm going to get to in just a moment. This is literally breaking right now. That's going to be bad news for both Florida and Georgia. I'll get to that here in just a second. But on the LSU thing here for a moment, I mean, you laid it out why it's so big here for LSU, and I completely agree with you on that. These are LSU fans that are hungry to have something to celebrate. We talked about that yesterday in relationship to what Les Miles said about Ed Orgeron about asking for patience. The thing that LSU fans are the most impatient about is the state of the recruiting class. Yeah. They expect to be in the top 5. They didn't get a chance to see that last year. A guy like Stingley just makes it more possible that you could be in that group here for 2018.
Yeah, I mean,
2019.
And you add that to Cardell Thomas, who's already on board, and you look at the possibility that Ishmael Sopsher, is a guy that could be a heavy LSU lean by the end of the year. Now, I think that has a lot to do with what goes on the field. He's already said that he doesn't mind leaving the state of Louisiana. But I think he's still, a lean to LSU. You put those guys at the top of any signing class, it's going to look like a good signing class. Doesn't matter what else happens in the signing class. LSU, having those 3 guys, can sign just about anybody else and land in the top 10. That is imperative. The word I keep using, that is imperative for Ed Orgeron.
I am going to read some comments from LSU fans on this here in a moment. Let me deal with something that's breaking right now, and obviously we'll probably tomorrow and throughout the next couple days sort of unpack the significance of this a bit more. But Derek Rambo Hunter was a 4-star defensive end from South Florida, a guy that's visited Florida a ton, a guy that has sort of publicly called Georgia his leader in the past, flirted with Georgia a lot. This is a big head-to-head battle between Florida and Georgia for Derek Rambo Hunter. But tweeting out here just in the last couple of minutes, Derek Hunter says, I'm 100% committed to Florida State. So Willie Taggart sliding in here. Now, this is an in-state product here, a South Florida kid, but a guy that had huge interest from Florida, shown a lot of interest to Florida, had some great things to say about Sinceri there, the position coach he'd be working with at Florida, a guy that was on campus for Georgia for G-Day, called that a bit of a dream visit. Derrick Hunter has chosen Florida State here. That's late breaking news. That's a massive blow to both the Gators and Georgia, who were sort of thinking they were going to go head-to-head over Derrick Hunter here.
Yeah, no, and listen, this is and obviously, you know, we're diving into this as we're on air and as we're talking about it, but just knowing what I know about Florida's recruiting class right now, somebody they needed. I mean, you talk about trying to build some momentum. Instead, you have the negative momentum. Instead, you're starting over from zero a little bit. Now, I don't think by any means, listen, this day and age in recruiting, it's not done until it's done. But that's definitely a blow in Florida's direction for sure.
Let me just read you the quick line here from Derrick Hunter, and then we'll take some more comments. He says, this is his notes app message. After talking with my family and coaches and building a relationship with the coaching staff that I've been knowing since a freshman, staying on me every step of the way, and thank God for the opportunity he gave me, and blessings with that being said, I'm proud to announce 100% committed to Florida State. I don't really know as much about the Hunter relationship with Florida State, but it sounds like it's one for Willie Taggart that began before he came to Florida State back when he was at South Florida. Remember, that's where Taggart was before going to Oregon, comes back to Florida State. It sounds like that recruiting relationship started at South Florida, maybe what was instrumental here for Derrick Hunter.
Yeah, and that's understandable, and it is sometimes long-term things. Now, I think you're going to have to see the Florida State season play out. I think it's the same way whenever you talk about a first-year head coach, when some of these guys start jumping on board, hey, what are we getting? You know, are this guy selling us about, a load of goods? If Florida State goes 6-6 again this year, you might see him start jumping off. But, Willie Taggart's one of those guys that was hired as a recruiter at Florida State. And we're not going to go into ACC football a ton on this show, but I just think, and you talked about it being a blow to Georgia. It's obviously a guy they wanted to get on campus, but this is for Florida. We've talked about it on this show, how big of a deal we think it is for Dan Mullen to get out ahead of Willie Taggart, right? He's got to start fast. He's got to try to beat Florida State. He's got to start getting some of these recruits. It's not adding up right now.
Alan Rabanchik says recruiting ain't over until they sign. Alan's a Georgia fan. You obviously know that's wishful thinking on his part. I would agree with Alan that obviously a lot of these guys are going to have second thoughts before the signing period ends here. It seems like sometimes those South Florida kids have a tendency to flip more so than others, so we'll obviously follow that, but that's certainly where it is right now. Erica Allen saying the Derrick Hunter news, not necessarily a surprise to her, so there's that on that. We'll get some YouTube comments here in a moment. Mike, you've got the YouTube feed pulled up right now. I don't. You want to read anything on YouTube? By the way, Charles Hands, complimentary to you for imperative. He says Mike is imperative, meaning it's imperative that he save his job. In other words, what was the Derrick Stingley thing sort of a job saver potentially for Ed Orgeron?
No, and I think that when you talk about LSU signing class, and it's like I said, the way the state of Louisiana recruits right now, the talent level that's in the state, Ed Orgeron could trip all over himself and still have a top 10 class. But I think that when you highlight the top 3 or 4 guys that are those 5-star prospects, imperative is the right word. Ed Orgeron has to begin landing these guys, and it can't stop, right? It's got to be a continuous process. But Derrick Stingley sounding as comfortable as he did and announcing it in the way he did and just saying, hey, listen, this is home. There was no toss-up. There's no round of visits, even though that's still to come. I think it was a big deal.
James Hayes Jr. says, going back to the LSU situation, all LSU lacks is a quarterback. Once they establish who their quarterback is, watch out for LSU, and obviously there's hope that Joe Burrow becomes that guy. Also in the comments section, Tim Glover says at least LSU finally has to be excited about something, gets to be excited about something, and I think that's our line on this as well. It's the Stingley news gives LSU a chance to be excited about something.
And that's what I said, aside from Joe Burrow, this is probably the best piece of news that LSU's gotten all offseason, right? I mean, this is – and the questions are going to continue to be about Ed Orgeron, the quarterback position, Steve Ensminger, but when you can build – when you can point to something in the future. We talked about this on signing day last year about Ed Orgeron not landing the quarterback that went to Texas A&M. When you can point to the future and say, hey, this is when it's going to turn a corner, then I think that's when your seat gets a little bit cooler than it was to begin with.
Let me get a couple more comments here because there's a couple interesting ones coming in. This is also on Facebook. Indy Anderson says, I'm sorry, but Florida State and Taggart killing it right now in Florida. Mullen better step it up, and I mean fast. The same thing being echoed by some other Florida fans as well, including Quentin Flanders, who says, I'm a Gator and FSU is killing us. I mean, that is an issue. You know my skepticism about Dan Mullen has always been based on recruiting. He got some good recruits at Mississippi State, but you need all good recruits in Florida. And the media narrative, and I think the media does like Dan Mullen a lot, is he's going to come in and coach up who Florida has. But that's for plucky underdogs. Florida doesn't get to be the plucky underdog. They've got to be the macro program. And right now, it does seem the Derrick Hunter news, another example of this, of Florida State just in-state flexing a bit more than what Florida's been able to do thus far under Dan Mullen.
And it's hard to argue, even for the Florida fans that are very high on Dan Mullen, because I'm high on Dan Mullen. I really do think X's and O's wise he's a good coach, but I think this year is his opportunity, while he still has some of the talent before that on campus, to get some of those wins. But let's be honest here, Jalen Humphreys is their number 1 recruit right now. Number 202 ranked prospect in the country. That's your number 1 recruit right now in this signing class in terms of commitments. And I think that's really, really a red flag talking about Dan Mullen recruiting.
Cliff Nelson says, by the way, that the state of Louisiana has loaded this cycle too. That's another thing that could potentially help Ed Orgeron here, the overall amount of talent that could be in the state of Louisiana.
I do have a problem with Cliff, though, saying that Ed Orgeron saves his job with 7 or more wins and a top 3 class. Top 3 class, yes, that's going to be huge. But 7 or more wins, I think 7 wins, Orgeron's fired.
Yeah, see, here's the problem with that, and I agree with Mike on this. That I joke all the time, I'm going to save some of y'all's comments and start reading them, a few months from now, because the emotion of going through the season has a way of changing stuff big time.
And it's got to be the right 7, right? I mean, 7 to me gets Ed Orgeron fired. I mean, I'm not an LSU fan, but that's tough.
Let's hop over here and talk about Georgia for a minute. Item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Ironic that we were just mentioning a recruit that Georgia loses out on, at least for now, and Derrick Rambo Hunter, because there's also the subject of recruits currently committed to UGA that some Dog fans are a little nervous about because they've taken visits other places. Now I want to go back in time here for a moment to signing day of February 2017. And actually, when Georgia put together a massive class, number 3 class in the country, and one of the things that Kirby gave credit to on that day for why Georgia was able to have so much recruiting success, arguably up to that point the best class that Georgia had ever signed, there were some rock-solid commits, guys who did not take visits other places. Kirby says when you've got that level of commitments from some of your recruits, it's just easier to focus on others. Here is Kirby Smart from 2 Februaries ago.
Because we knew and we trusted that the relationship we had developed allowed us to go other places and go see other guys. And I think that's always the key to getting a good class is how fast can you get started on the next class. So meanwhile, while you're recruiting this class, we were able to get ahead and go see some 2018 and 2019 guys out there.
So that is what Georgia had going for it in 2017. Guys not taking visits, you can focus not just on the recruits from this particular class, but you can start looking ahead to future classes because you've got rock-solid commits. Safe to say right now for the 2019 cycle, that's not necessarily the case for UGA. Right. They do have a laundry list of very impressive commitments, but some of those commits are sort of wandering eye, willing to take visits other places, including the wide receiver, the 5-star, the nation's number 1 player at that position, Jaden Hazelwood. He told 24/7 Sports recently that he didn't view his recruitment as being over. When we got a chance to interview Jaden Hazelwood a couple of months ago at an event we did for Dog Nation, Hazelwood explained his philosophy on why he wants to take visits. Does Kirby like this? Listen and decide for yourself.
I'm in the process of scheduling my officials right now. Like, I'm taking my first one in April to Oklahoma, of course. I mean, but that doesn't change my opinion on Georgia. Like, I see fans commenting like, someone told me respect the fans and we'll respect you or something like that. And I just looked at it and was like, man, y'all don't understand. You only can do it one time.
So he says, you don't understand. You can only do it one time. I want to take my visits, in other words, and enjoy this process here and really investigate all these programs apparently that are inviting him for visits and recruiting him as hard as they are. I mean, how do you come down on this? For fans, they're hypocritical, and I'm the same way. I want my commits not visit anywhere else. And I want to flip every commit from every other school in the world. I mean, there's all a nature of hypocrisy when it comes to this kind of stuff. But what do you say to the Georgia fan who says, boy, I sure do wish Jaden Hazelwood would stop visiting other places, Auburn, Oklahoma, places like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's hard to swallow. And to me, personally, I was, listen, I committed because I had an offer from Alabama, and I was like, it is what it is. I'm not going to go anywhere else. And, the offers for me were much less than were Jaden Hazelwood. So I understand, the way of looking at it, saying, hey, listen, you don't want to take your visits. I do think it's important, though, for these guys to get out and see what their opportunities are. I think what makes it more of a head-scratcher to me is, if that's still what you want to do, then why are you committed to Georgia? Mm-hmm. I think that probably Kirby Smart kind of angles that to where, hey, listen, our class is going to fill up very fast. And all the coaches do this, not just Kirby Smart. Our class is going to fill up fast. We want to make sure we can hold a spot for you. You need to commit so we know if you're going to come or not. We don't want to wait till signing day until we know because we're going to hold a spot for you. But I think in the same breath, you have to be careful when you are committing that if you want to take a bunch of other visits, that's fine. Just don't commit. And that's where it kind of gets in a little bit of gray area for me.
So for me, even though I would obviously prefer and y'all know I got the red and black on right now, I am a Georgia fan, I'd prefer Jaden Hazelwood not to take other visits. The truth is I ain't mad at him, though. Because, any level of commitment from Jaden Hazelwood is better than uncommitted Jaden Hazelwood. It just is. And Alan Verbanchik in the Facebook comment section says that he thinks Hazelwood's all dog. Ultimately, I think that's true, too. I think what SEC fans want to be are the kind of fans that are confident enough to believe that their program, their favorite one, sells itself even when player X is on campus Y, right?
Right.
You know, if you're a Georgia fan, you hope that Hazelwood's at Auburn, but being at Auburn is only a reminder of how good things really are at Georgia.
Yeah, not only that,
that's what you hope anyway.
Not only that, but maybe you bump into Owen Popo, while you're down there at Auburn. Maybe it's like, hey, this things are pretty good up here in Athens, by the way,
right.
And you might want to wrap some.
May not be
like
room
I
for
said,
Popo anymore.
Yeah, no, it's tough for me. It's tough for me to look at the situation and really judge these kids. And it's like he said, you only get this opportunity one time. Why not, do everything you can and see the country and fly out and have some of these visits? But I don't really know what angle to take on that, to be honest with you.
Let me hit a few comments here. Jared Seeger says, it's all true. Let them take their visits, have some fun. Jared's an Alabama fan, but I agree with this point on this. Ben Moon Mullen says these guys should take those visits. Eugene Cummings kind of agrees the same way. Let those guys enjoy what they work for. I mean, and all three of those comments kind of combined together sort of get to my point on this too, is that, these official visits, by the way, are 5 free trips.
And they're not like cheap trips.
Yeah, they take good care of you on official visits. It's all legal. It's just the way that things go. It's your chance to really see the best foot forward for a campus. It's one of the reasons why a lot of times the school that you're going to, you don't take an official visit to. Now, most of the big-time SEC schools will get official visits from their actual commitments, but sometimes you don't feel like you need to take the official visit to the school that you're going to. You want to go see somewhere else. And if you're a big major program like an Alabama, Ohio State does this, you'll foot the bill for an official visit, even for kids you're not getting because, hey, we got the money, why not take a shot here?
No, listen, I'm pretty sure I gained 10 pounds when I was on official.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you show up to the restaurant and you're going through this 5-course meal and it's like, hey, do you want the lobster or the steak? Hey, go ahead and get both. Like, do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel comfortable on this visit. So you are treated. It's not just because you're a 5-star prospect. You're treated like a 5-star person. Your whole family is.
Gary and Christian Gulisano on Facebook says, I got no problem with Jaden Hazelwood. When you commit to a job, do you ever completely stop looking for other jobs to better your career? Doesn't mean you're going to leave, just checking out the options. And I agree with Gary on this. I mean, the truth is, for the 25 guys that do come to your school, you want them to feel like they made the best choice once they got there, not once they've been on campus for a while. Oh, I should have checked out Big State University down the road here, because you want them to feel pretty good about how they ended up where they are.
And I think Esteban Esteves brings up a good point. It's these programs are still shopping around for players that play that position too. I mean, this goes back to the Ryan Olinsky story down in South Carolina. The South Carolina offers the quarterback, and he's like, hey, what's the deal here? And then Olinsky, puts his thing. Hey, listen, really had fun. Thanks USC for the offer.
Yeah.
It is interesting to see the dynamic between some of these teams and players. You can't fault them though.
Let's talk Auburn here, item number 4 on our SEC Country Line first in 10 list. Let me go back in time here to last July. Almost a year ago, Auburn coach Gus Malzahn's at SEC Media Days. He was talking about the challenge that everybody in the SEC West faces. That's trying to catch up with the big behemoth that is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Well, Malzahn had some confidence in the summer, was apparently proven true during the season, because even back then he thought he had the kind of team that might be able to stay close with the Crimson Tide of Alabama. Here's Gus Malzahn from SEC Media Days.
What I do like about this team is they have high expectations. Their goal is to win the SEC championship, and to do that, you've got to beat Alabama. The last 2 times we beat them, we won the league. We played for the national championship, winning one of those and coming close the second time. But, we got them at home. That's a positive. But we have a very confident team.
98 Sports Talk on YouTube says, when it comes to the over-under win total for Auburn, he says, I'm going to say it's about 9 this season for Auburn. 10's going to be tough, but I do think they could get there. Well, last year, Malzahn talked about winning the game against Alabama. They were ultimately able to do that. They won the SEC West. Didn't win the SEC, but obviously they're looking to build on that coming in here the 2018 season. The reason why 98 brings that up is because we wanted to talk about that right now, the notion of the possibility of a double-digit win season for Auburn. The South Point Hotel and Casino, we cite these sort of gambling odds from time to time. They've got that over-under number for Auburn sitting right at 9. Either over that, get you to 10 in the regular season. Obviously below that, get you a pretty disappointing season for a coach that you just signed to a multi-year $7+ million a year extension in Gus Malzahn. Do you see double-digit regular season wins for Auburn this year?
I just don't. I don't. If I could put it right at 9. Now the over/unders could be 9, so you can't get it at 9. I'm projecting 9 wins for Auburn this year. I have them losing to Alabama and Tuscaloosa. I have them losing to Georgia, and I have them dropping the opener against Washington. I've said it a couple of different times. I know that people look at Pac-12 football and they think Washington's not going to be able to keep up with Auburn. Well, guess what? Auburn in that building in Atlanta doesn't have a great recent track record of keeping up with anybody. And so I think that's an issue. Now, I think if you pressed me on it and you said, hey, you have to take the over/under, I'm going under. I'm going under that 9 wins because I had them at 3 losses, and Gus Malzahn has proven the inconsistencies are going to show their head each and every year for Auburn. I think that you can't look at it and say he's definitely winning these games. Gus Malzahn has not had that track record of the consistency in a lot of these games. Listen, Auburn fans are going to hop on me. Bama guy saying this. I'm just telling you how I feel. I don't think the consistency is there. They always trip up in some of these games, and they always look bad offensively in some of these games. And at one point along the way, even if they lose to Alabama, even they lose to Alabama, Georgia, and Washington, my money's on them tripping up somewhere else too.
You've got Jared Stidham, who's a Heisman contender at quarterback. You're coming off a year in which you beat Alabama and won the SEC West. If Auburn goes 9-3, if they push the Vegas number, and Vegas doesn't just pull this number out of the air, this is backed up by data. If Auburn goes 9-3, losing the big games, Washington, Georgia, Alabama, that's an unmitigated disaster.
It's tough.
And it's
tough.
It's statistically probably the most likely outcome of all. I mean, amazing number of these over-unders end up landing somewhere near a push from Vegas. As I said, this is not just some number pulled out of thin air. Vegas thinks before it acts here. It puts its money where its mouth is. But this is the weird state of the SEC, especially in a time when coaching salaries keep going up. And Malzahn's in that $7 million a year club. If they go 9-3, that's an unmitigated disaster.
And what makes this tough for me too is I'm going to take it on the dot at 9. I mean, I really would love to take the number. If I could put my money on over, under, or 9, my money would be on 9. You know what I mean? Like I would put the. But and I think it's hard to look at the schedule and find that fourth loss when you look at it. I mean,
it'd be a huge upset, whatever.
It'd have to be LSU, and that's a home game. It'd have to be at Mississippi State. That's in Starkville. That could be a tough game. Texas A&M in Auburn. I mean, that shapes up to where it looks like 9 to me. If I'm picking the games right now, I'm picking them to win 9. And it's like Enrique Murillo says on the YouTube comment section, inconsistency in Auburn is key. And it just, Gus Malzahn, for every amount of something he gained for me in my eyes last year, the consistency just wasn't one of them. I was so disappointed in some of the output they had on the field at times.
Well, you and I are very different in the Auburn-Washington game. I have a lot of confidence for Auburn in that game. You mentioned Auburn's troubles in Atlanta. There are some. You can reference the SEC Championship, the Peach Bowl, just most recently as examples of that. This is still a Washington team traveling 3,000 miles to get here, and that's a big factor here as well. You know, they didn't look great the last time they were in Atlanta either against Alabama in the college football playoff. You can say, well, this Auburn team is not as good as that Alabama team. It's still, there's some travel concerns here. So let's put the Auburn game aside for a moment. Even if Auburn wins the rest of them and loses both these rivalry games, they're both road games, but both these rivalry games to Georgia and Alabama, I'm going to predict that next offseason Auburn fans are in kind of a sour mood even then. I'm going to give you 10-2 at that point in time. I think Auburn fans are still in a bad mood.
10-2, they're fine. And
without a win against Florida, without a win against Georgia or Alabama?
Yeah, because, all three of those teams and Washington, those are all top 5 teams.
They'll accept it, but they're not fine.
Yeah, that's fair. They're going to accept that. But I don't think you're giving enough credit to Washington and Chris Peterson. Listen, back right when I left school, when I was living in Atlanta, Chris Peterson brought Boise State over here and had a good game down at the Georgia Dome.
Yeah, but this Auburn team's better than that Georgia team.
That's true.
They lost to
but
Georgia.
Washington's got more talent than Boise State. I'm just saying that Chris Peterson it can get his guys mentally ready to play, even traveling across country. Washington's got Myles Gaskin and Jake Browning. They got 19 returning starters. I'm just telling you, that's not going to be an easy game for Auburn.
98 Sports Talk says if Auburn can't run the ball, that's trouble. We're obviously waiting to see those new running backs emerge, but between Whitlow and Asa Martin, maybe some of these guys, Cam Martin, we do think that running back core is probably going to emerge here. G. Grace on YouTube also says Auburn's like the stock market. You never know, and there is obviously that consideration here of the sort of ups and down seasons. The 2010 National Championship wasn't followed up by much. The 2013 SEC Championship wasn't followed up by much. It's a consistent level of recruiting, adding players to the roster every year. Statistically, the overall profile doesn't look too bad. I'm just higher on Auburn for this season than a lot of other people are, I guess.
David Hands, he weighs in the Facebook comment section, says, so they should play easier schedules like Bama and Georgia, right? Listen, we can circle the wagons all day once. Just because Washington ended up being in the top 5, I mean, Bama tried to face off against Florida State last year. Georgia goes home and home with Notre Dame. This Johnny-come-lately attitude of these schedules aren't very good, it just doesn't work in the long run when you really highlight those things.
Item number 5 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And speaking of the notion of the South Point over-under totals, this is fun fodder for debate. Couldn't help but notice that a couple teams in the SEC East had the exact same total. Florida and Missouri both at a 7.5. Now, what's interesting about them on the same total is, in some respects, at least in the most simplistic of terms, they're almost opposite teams. Florida is okay in some respects, maybe not a very good quarterback. Missouri has a really good quarterback, but I'm not sure they have much else of really anything else on the roster.
Right.
So who's more likely to go over the 7.5 to find that 8th win? Is it Florida? Is it Missouri?
This is a slam dunk for Florida.
Okay.
This is and it says more about what Missouri's schedule is. I don't know if you've really taken a hard look at what Missouri's schedule is. Let me try to pull it up for you, because their away schedule, in my opinion, is probably the hardest away schedule, and they could lose 2 non-conference.
I know
games
they're at
easily.
Alabama. That's one at least.
They could lose 2 non-conference games, in my opinion, easily when you look at what they're going to be able to do. I'm trying to pull it up right now. Now they play at Purdue. First of all, that's not a game you can slam dunk for Missouri.
Didn't Missouri get walloped by Purdue last year?
They
just got absolutely
like 35-0 or something.
That's a humiliation.
They also play Memphis in a non-conference game.
Ooh, Mike Norvell.
That's not going to be an
Norvell
easy
stayed
game.
at Memphis,
Norvell
right?
stayed at Memphis last year. You add in the fact that they are at Tuscaloosa, at South Carolina, they're at Purdue, like I said, they're at Florida, and they're at Knoxville. Now, Florida and Tennessee, they don't scare you, but when we're talking about Mizzou, I'm taking Florida in a runaway over that schedule.
I wouldn't give you 2 shiny nickels for Missouri. I really wouldn't.
That's what I'm saying.
I really would.
That's what I'm saying. Like, those games aren't tough, but you can't look at that schedule and tell me that they're more slated to go over the 7 or 7.5 wins or whatever.
I'm not high on Florida, but you make a very compelling argument. I'm gonna take Florida. In comparison to Missouri to get to 8 wins, I'm gonna take it every day of the week.
Exactly.
I don't think one quarterback changes things that much. When I think that they may have a dunce as an offensive coordinator in Derek Dooley, and I'm just not really sure what else Missouri has going for it. Drew Lock doesn't change the scenario for me that much. Yeah. Here's what's frustrating for everybody in the SEC, Missouri fans and non-Missouri fans. Just because they lose a lot of games still doesn't mean they're easy to beat.
No doubt.
You know what I'm saying? So
no doubt.
It's like they may lose most of the games, they just may not lose to you.
They're going to get the old puncher's chance.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They're going to get the puncher's chance. Hey, Drew Lock can throw the ball 80 yards. He's going to try to in a lot of these football games and just see what happens down the field. They're going to have a puncher's chance.
Because, I mean, you mentioned your alma mater, Alabama. They host Missouri. They'll be a massive favorite, and yet, I shouldn't say suspect, a bit unknown Alabama secondary against a first-round pick quarterback. That's not a game that you don't lose any sleep over.
No doubt. And it's where it lines up to. And I'll be the first one to tell you. I've highlighted this on Roll Tide Daily a couple times. Ole Miss coming in with their wide receiver core and Jordan Ta'amu there in week 3. That's another game with the puncher's chance. Everybody, listen, 21-point favorite, whatever. I don't care. That game they could have some leeway in there.
Jamie Blanton says this year and next is even for Missouri and Florida. If either or both gets 8 wins, it's equally great at this point in their story. No shot at either. Just honestly, neither team had a top 130 defense last year. I don't know if they were out of the 130, but they were not very good defensively. Neither one of these teams were excellent defensively. Bo Molinari says, I'll take Missouri. You got your rivalry blinders on. Florida's sliding backward. Missouri is up and coming. Honestly, I don't know why Missouri's up and coming. I mean, they're going to lose Drew Lock at the end of the year. Lindsey Scott's the transfer from LSU. I have no idea if he can play or not. If he could play, he'd be starting at LSU. I mean, they were looking for quarterback. So, I don't know that Missouri's on the rise here. Barry Odom, I couldn't pick him out of a lineup.
I mean, I could pick Barry, but I don't know. I don't think you can put Missouri in the category of on the rise. I mean, maybe the comment section can tell me otherwise why Missouri's on the rise, but to me, Missouri's getting ready. I think they're going to have a new head coach next year, a new quarterback, a new everything next year when they take the field in 2019.
Brent Tier says there's no D in Missouri. That is factually accurate on a number of fronts, I would say. And for now, though, let's move on to item number 6 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Once again, on the theme of South Point over-under totals, Alabama set at a robust 11. There's a little juice on the under here, meaning they think that 10's a little bit more likely than 12 when it comes to regular season totals. But if you take the South Point just strictly at its word here, they see a regular season loss coming for Alabama. So I ask you, where is the most likely regular season loss for Alabama?
This one's been tough for me. This has been an ongoing point of contention for me since we've started talking about the 2018 Alabama schedule. Now, you take the names off the back of the jersey and just focus on the ones in front and where the locations are. I'm saying LSU all day. I will die saying that Baton Rouge game is always tough. As many games as they've won in a row in Baton Rouge, they've never been easy. I mean, 10-0 a couple of years ago, the fumble game, we've mentioned it a bunch. It's always hard to win in Baton Rouge. Then I look at what Auburn was able to pull off last year. Gus Malzahn, for all the knocks I had on Gus Malzahn a minute ago, he understands offense against the Alabama Crimson Tide better than anybody else that we've seen attack that defense. He just does. I mean, he understands where to attack it, where the weaknesses are, who the playmakers are. So I always give him a puncher's chance too. The fact that that's the Iron Bowl and it's a rivalry game too is always going to be scary. Outside of those two, you're going to give Ole Miss a puncher's chance. Like I said, they're going to be throwing the ball over the field. Mississippi State's going to have a good team coming back this year, but I'm narrowed down to LSU or Auburn.
I got to make you choose one, though. I mean, Vegas says one. So if I'm going to make you pick one, is it LSU or is it Auburn?
If I'm picking one, and Auburn fans are going to hate me for this, it's LSU.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, the LSU game, go back and look at it. Bama fans, 6 in a row. But I'm just telling you, the game's never been easy. It wasn't easy last year. Last year, statistically, even in Tuscaloosa, LSU was still punch for punch with Alabama last year.
You've said this kind of stuff enough that I had a feeling you might say that. So, and I'm honestly just curious of your opinion. If I take the tradition of this series out of the conversation, you can't mention anything from a previous year. Can you make a case for LSU being the toughest game for Alabama this year based on evidence that only exists for this year?
Well, and that's how I started off talking about it. If you take the names off the back of the jersey and focus on the front and focus on where it's at, like I said, it's LSU. The problem for me is this. You're going to get a couple of JUCO transfer offensive linemen. LSU is the least experienced offensive line, I think, in the entire SEC. I mean, they're not returning a ton. LSU
it's
and
one
Auburn,
of those things, if I was Tony Reale, I'd have to give you like the points.
Right.
It's that.
LSU and Auburn both have the least experience in the SEC in terms of offensive line. That's a question mark for me. What do you get in out of the running back position that is the reason that LSU has been so tough out of Alabama? I don't know about that either. So that's where you start to circle back around to Gus Malzahn and say, boy, this could be a notch in his direction. But for me right now, if I'm picking one, LSU is the toughest game.
All right, very interesting Iron Bowl debate here in the Facebook comment section. Troy Baker says the only reason why Auburn beat us last year is because Jalen Hurts couldn't pass the ball. However, Mickey Cooper says Saban is mediocre versus Gus. And I've told you this. That's what the Iron Bowl is about this year. It may lead to another national championship for Alabama, but the truth is that game, to use your word, is not imperative for winning the national championship because Alabama lost it and still won the title a year ago. But what it's imperative for, what it's crucial for, is to keep these Auburn fans from saying that all of a sudden Gus Malzahn is Nick Saban kryptonite. Because Saban, who's the greatest, justifiably getting praised as the greatest coach in college football, if you're 500 over the last 6 years against Gus Malzahn, which he would be with a loss this season, at that point in time, your bragging rights don't work in the Yellowhammer Stadium.
And I can't refute that. I mean, Nick Saban is, I want to say, 7-4 against Auburn in the time he's been at Alabama. Blows everybody else out of the water. I mean, you look at what he has been against every other football team. 7-4 against Auburn is a glaring number. You have to double check that down the list of what Nick Saban has done against a lot of those SEC opponents. And 3 of those have involved Gus Malzahn.
All right, let's talk about Les Miles here for a moment. Item number 7 in our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So we have had a couple days worth of provocative Les Miles audio. Another example of this right now from the Matt Moscona show there in the state of Louisiana, where Matt asks a very probing question to Les Miles. Some people have said that you would have liked to have been or would have made a good LSU athletic director when you transition away from being Tigers head coach. The host, Matt Moscona, asked Miles, would you have wanted to be LSU AD? Miles says a lot of words. None of those words are no. Take a listen to Les Miles talking about being LSU AD.
Needs to say is just, how can I help you? As a coach, I would understand those things that would help them most. Recruiting, the consistency of teaching, the way to market your school, your academic strengths, and how to recruit best. I would love to help a coaching fraternity and community to be the best.
So you hear him there go from being asked, hey, would that have been a fun job, to sort of pitching himself for the job. And there's no other way to interpret what Les Miles says than that's his pitch of, here's why I'd be a good AD. This is not, I'm not saying that one comment or a couple of comments from a couple of different radio shows sort of lead to some sort of, I don't know, breakdown of, society there in Louisiana. But to the extent that this matters, none of this is good.
No. And you're right, it doesn't matter a ton. And this is peak June 20th talking point, and but it's Les Miles being entertaining, and it picks up steam, and then he keeps getting invited on radio shows because you know he's going to say something.
That's exactly right.
And the fact of the matter is
Let me stop you right there before you move on. That's such a good point that, if nothing else, this starts the snowball of interview requests.
And we're heading straight towards SEC Media Days, and we're heading towards a collision point of all these people talking about Les Miles, because Ed Orgeron will be asked about Les Miles in a couple of these circles. The bottom line is this. I think this is what, in my opinion, continues that spurring. I wonder how many LSU fans, and you guys will obviously answer me, how many LSU fans would trade Joe Alleva right now for Les Miles? And I think it's a big enough number to where it becomes concerning.
That's why it's a problem. And I'm going to tell you this right now. I mean, I've told this before. It used to be that SEC athletic directors was sort of like the coach's last job. It's like the retirement gig, right? It's the same way the old football coach becomes assistant principal at the high school once the coaching career is done. That's not what being an athletic director is anymore. This is a job for geeks. It's a job for number crunchers. This is what athletic director jobs are now. It's about fundraising. It's not about being a part of the, Miles used the phrase, coaching fraternity there. That's not what this is about. And I'm sorry, I hate to say it this way, but the audio that you just heard from Les Miles, I edited that heavily.
Right.
Because there's a lot of ums. There's a lot of delayed speech. There's a lot of starting and stopping. Miles, what made him ineffective in job interviews to get another head coaching job after he got fired by LSU, I hate to say this, that stuff shows up in these radio interviews where if you don't edit the stuff down, what you hear is meandering. What you hear is someone who seemingly hopes that people will allow his resume to speak for itself. And he did win a couple of SEC titles in Baton Rouge, and he won a national championship. And I would say that he's probably justifiably popular because of that with LSU fans. But he's unfit to be an athletic director.
I mean, is he? Yeah. I mean, I would argue that Joe Alleva might be too. And for some of the situations he's put LSU in, and this is why I think it's a possibility. Look at the comment section on Facebook right now. How many people are saying this is Philip Fulmer number 2. Fulmer gets fired. He keeps talking. He stays on the circuit, goes away for 10 years. All of a sudden, he's hailed as the guy who's going to be the next savior and come in and be able to, hire somebody back into that position. Now, do I think it would work with Les Miles being the AD over Coach Orgeron? Absolutely not. I think Les Miles would probably do away with Orgeron a couple of months into the job.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, but do I think that in the future that you could circle back in 5, 6, 7 years and try to make that hire? Absolutely. By the way, there's probably a couple of people at Oklahoma State that wish he was the AD right there now.
Let me fly through some comments here on the Les Miles subject. William Jeter brings up an interesting point. He says LSU actually has the longest consecutive winning season streak in the SEC. I didn't realize it was true, William. That's pretty interesting. Also, Jason Soul says Les Miles can't do worse than Joe Alleva. That's why I think the comments from Les Miles are problematic. He is never going to be LSU athletic director. He's just not. But what he does is invite the comparison. Miles is more popular than Joe Alleva, even within LSU circles, because Miles, won the national championship there. It only serves to undermine Alleva's credibility. You don't get Les Miles, but now you're reminded of how much you don't like Joe Alleva.
No, and that's what it is. And let's be honest here. Les Miles is not going to be a movie star in 10 years, right? Yeah. I mean, he's obviously probably not going to be a head coach in 10 years. So what are we left circling with every year at this time? We're left with Les Miles being funny on the radio and circling back to whatever the deficiencies are in the LSU athletic department.
Maurice Carter says Les Miles only wants to be LSU's AD just so he can fire Coach O on the spot and make himself the job, which also kind of brings it back to some of those Philip Fulmer comparisons. Matt Markham has made some of those there. Jazz Hatcher says that Les Miles is one strange dude. Jared Seegers also says he sounds like Philip Fulmer without the whole backstabbing part, and obviously those accusations are out there in terms of how Philip Fulmer sort of worked his way up the job ranks there at Tennessee. But the one difference between Fulmer and Miles, at least the one difference is that Philip Fulmer is good at playing that game. I think that Philip Fulmer likely sold himself to Tennessee better than Miles would be capable of selling himself once again here to LSU.
Yeah, and the bottom line is that you don't see LSU ever bottoming out the way Tennessee did this past offseason. I mean,
yeah.
The
situation at Tennessee was just way more desperate than almost any SEC.
It took
game.
a disastrous situation at Tennessee for them to kind of invite Philip Fulmer in as the savior and give him a 4-year deal. So.
Now, Cliff Nelson, who is a huge LSU fan in our YouTube comment section, says Les would be perfect for athletic director. Been screaming that on here for months. Might not be so good for Orgeron, though, LOL, which some people have said. Here's the only way that Les Miles would work at LSU or Philip Fulmer could work at Tennessee. Now, he's got the job, but here's the way it has to work. If you want to put like a public face out there and have the real work being done behind the scenes, the number crunching, the fundraising, because remember, you can be like the backslapping good old boy guy like Fulmer and Miles, but with these donors, you still have to ask for the order. You still have to say, all right, now it's time to write the check. Yeah. And that's not an easy skill to have. Salespeople are salespeople for a reason. They know how to do that. Fulmer and Miles, that may not be a part of their skill set as it stands. So if you want to make them the ceremonial leader of the program, you got to have the real leaders working behind the scenes. The not famous people, those are the people who get everything done. The chief of staff, so to speak.
I agree with you. But here's the thing, though. Les Miles, if I had to pick like every recent coach from SEC schools, I think Les Miles would be at the top of my list of who I'd like to go have a beer with. I mean, and I think that for those social reasons, I think that's what puts him in that elevated kind of category for me.
All right, item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Once again, to go back to the South Point, the sports book in Las Vegas with its over-under totals. And it seems like every time one of these sports books comes out with these things, we chat about them a little bit. It's just sort of fun fodder. Georgia high on the South Point list. 10.5 for Georgia with a little juice on the over. What that means is it's a bit more expensive to bet the over than it is to bet the under here.
Right.
So that's the context for that, which once again for the South Point would seem to suggest that they view the 11-win total as more likely than not for Georgia than 10 or 9 or something along those lines. Is that too much love for a Georgia team forced to replace Nick Chubb, forced to replace Sonny Michel, forced to replace Roquan Smith? Is a 10.5 with a lean towards 11, is that too much love for Georgia?
It's not too much love, and we've talked about this before, that little hook right there, that little half-point, half-win hook,
changes a lot.
That's what changes a lot. And you're looking at the schedule, and you don't have the Notre Dame this year, you don't have the big non-con game, and so you're looking at it and saying, hey, listen, can they get past Georgia Tech? Can they get past some of these games that could be iffy? They're going to be favored in all of them. That's the bottom line. They're going to be favored in all of them. So to put them at 10.5, if it's not for the losses of Chubb, Michel, and Roquan Smith, you're probably up there at 11 just because of what the schedule is. I don't think it's too much to ask at all. If I'm taking that, I'm probably taking the over of 10.5 right now, talking about what I think Georgia could be, because they're going to have a chance to run the gauntlet.
Zach Smith on our Facebook comment section says Georgia's going to be 12-0 after the regular season, winning 10 of those games by double digits. He's obviously very confident in UGA. Jarrett Seeger's the opposite. It's under, easiest bet in Vegas. For me, the debate about Georgia, though, is also about the rest of the SEC East here. And I feel like making Georgia as high a total as it is, I think Georgia's going to be very good this season, but making Georgia as high a win total as it is partially an indictment of the rest of the SEC East. And while I'll take Florida in comparison to Missouri, the truth is I don't think Florida or Missouri, either one, are very good. Tennessee's got its problems. I respect South Carolina, but Georgia on the road still more than a 2-touchdown favorite in that game. Really, the bold statement about Georgia is a stand taken against the rest of the SEC East, right?
That's completely what I'm trying to say. And I got to hold Brett Tierce accountable right here. Brett Tierce says, Georgia has a very easy schedule. 10-2, 11-1 at minimum. That's exactly what Vegas just told us. The 10.5 is the over-under. You got to pick one, Brett. You got to pick one. Are you going 10 or are you going 11? I think that's – and it boils down to his schedule, like you said. And I just don't see – Georgia could hiccup. And listen, they probably will hiccup at some point. And it's not going to be – listen, we got people in the comment section saying double-digit victory over everybody. I don't think Bama's got a chance of double-digit victories over everybody. But – if I'm picking 11, I'm going the over at 10.
Jason Souls says, actually, let me find Jason Souls' comment down here. He says, who in the East can compete with them? And Kirby Smart obviously looks at the situation in the SEC East, sees a brand new coach at rival Florida with Dan Mullen, sees a brand new coach at rival Tennessee with Jeremy Pruitt, but back during the spring, the development of these rivalry programs in the East, how good are they? We'll debate that. But Kirby explained he's not worried about that at all. He's worried about his own team and getting his own team ready for the fall. Here's Kirby.
I look at it just like I did last year. I mean, we got to beat them. The names and faces may change, but the places are all the same. So, I mean, I'm not concerned with what they're doing, and they're not probably concerned with what we're doing. We're obviously trying to develop a team that believes in its self-confidence, but I don't concern myself with what those guys are doing.
Bo Molinari in our Facebook comment section says, I'll give Georgia high confidence. Florida's down. Tennessee is too. South Carolina has to play the Aggies. That's Bo's team, by the way. Missouri obviously just doesn't belong. Vanderbilt's a private school. Maybe Kentucky can compete. So it sounds like Bo kind of echoing some of the things that some people have said, me included. The SEC is just not very good.
But here's the thing. Here's what I would lay out to be the blueprint. And I'm not high on South Carolina, and we talked about it. But how can you circle the wagons around Georgia not going to the SEC championship? You have to, first of all, rely on that crossover schedule. Going to Baton Rouge and playing Auburn in Athens is not going to be an easy crossover schedule. Add that to South Carolina, who could possibly get a victory over Texas A&M, and I think their other game is against Ole Miss as their crossover game. So can South Carolina shock Georgia early in the year and then have that matchup where you have both have 2 losses in the SEC? That's the only possibility to me.
Good to see our buddy Mike Griffith hanging out in the comment section. He's always a fun guy to talk some SEC football with, and right now in our Facebook comment section, you can do just that. Item number 9 here in our SEC Country Live, first in 10 list. So I don't know the first thing about Maryland, I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't even know they were looking for an athletic director, but apparently they are. One reporter lets us know, though, the names being considered, at least a couple of these, pretty wild. One maybe more contemporary than another. Let me show you the tweet here from Don Marcus, who says that he's hearing that Maryland's going to be interviewing 3 finalists. Temple AD Patrick Kraft, former Tennessee Athletic Director John Curry, and acting Terp Athletic Director Damon Evans to replace Kevin Anderson. Now, Damon Evans was the Athletic Director of Georgia. A lot of you guys are too young to remember his scandal, and that is not too strong of a word to use, scandal that led to his ouster at UGA somewhere around like 2008, 2009, 2010, whatever year that was. But everybody remembers John Curry, the former Tennessee Athletic Director, who was just let go there for the debacle that almost led to Greg Schiano being hired, led to him, allegedly offering a job to the controversial Mike Leach before he was finally sort of kicked to the curb by Beverly Davenport, the chancellor, who was then herself kicked to the curb there at Tennessee. I mean, do they not have the internet in College Park, Maryland? How in the name of goodness could you consider John Curry for your job opening?
Listen, I think this goes along the lines of, hey, we think Greg Schiano's good, right? We think Mike Leach would have been good. I think that's the only way you look at it, because other than that, it's hard to sweep the disaster that was the Tennessee John Curry debacle under the rug. It just is. I don't know how you're Maryland and look at it and say, hey, this would be a good hire, but evidently they're focusing on the positive parts of what he was able to do down in Knoxville. And what was he there, 10 months? 11 months, something like that. I don't know how you sweep it under the rug, but evidently Maryland's on a different Twitter feed than I am.
Yeah, I mean, listen, for me, and I will make a federal case out of this, very near where the federal government's housed there in College Park, Maryland, but for me, the John Curry thing comes down to an issue of leadership. I mean, it's one thing if you want to hire Greg Schiano, but you didn't have the leadership capability to sort of stand behind the hire. You didn't have your ducks in a row when you allowed it to sort of leak out. You flirted with John Gruden. You gave false hope to Tennessee fans. And really, for me, that's the biggest black eye on Curry at Tennessee, is the fact that he didn't squash the John Gruden rumors fast enough. Tennessee fans thought they were getting, at least a lot of them thought they were getting John Gruden. Every coach suffered by comparison. It's an issue of leadership from John Curry at Tennessee. To me, he's unfit to work anywhere.
No, and it's the Dan Wolken, kind of meddling from the emails.
Yeah.
It's Brady Hoke saying, "Hey, listen, I'll run the team."
In defense of Curry on this, every athletic director would look bad if their emails became public.
Terrible.
But his emails did become public, though, and he obviously suffered because
and that's
of that.
But the thing is, that's part of the story, because you're going to get those questions from donors, right? You're going to get those questions from fans of the team saying, hey, what about all this stuff that came out? And that's not going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating deal. All right, let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. Update on the College World Series. We both said yesterday, hadn't really been watching any College World Series. Did you watch College World Series stuff yesterday?
I did not.
Come on.
I tried to watch Arkansas last night. The game got canceled. It got moved to this morning.
It never stops raining.
No, I know. It's never stopped raining. So I had it on the docket. I was set up ready to watch the game.
So did Arkansas play today?
They did play today.
Did they win
today?
Anybody know?
Yeah, I think they.
They're still playing.
Still playing. Right?
All right, so they're still playing. But Florida beat Texas. They sent Texas packing. That's always kind of a good piece of news. Mississippi State fans seem to be having the time of their life out there.
No, and they should. And Mississippi State's got 2 days off. I looked into it. I tried to do all the research. Mississippi State won. They're kind of in the lead for this thing. They get 2 days off before they got to get back.
Are they lead? Are they still in the winners bracket?
They're in the winners bracket.
I think that's what it's called, the winners bracket.
Yeah, the winners bracket.
They're still in the winners
Listen,
bracket.
Brandon Walker's been celebrating on Twitter. He's been all over this thing. He's in Starkville doing his live shows. I mean, he's in there for
That's
this.
good times, man. Listen, there's nothing wrong
I'm
with
jealous,
that.
man. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, I'd love to go to Omaha at some point in time. Anyway, we'll sort of transition now to the way we always like to close the show with our champion of life, and it's also, as it turns out, College World Series theme, because one local TV station from Mississippi caught up with a Mississippi State fan about the excitement that goes along with being the College World Series. I'm not sure any of what this guy says is actually real, but it's certainly funny. It's been all over Twitter. We thought we'd share it with you right now. Take a look.
Not dampen the spirits for the fans of this morning's College World Series game.
The sacrifices that we personally made to be here are incredible. My wife's boyfriend sold his prosthetic leg on Craigslist to afford me the opportunity to be here, but they get alone time, and I get a chance to be in Omaha.
Terry Powell.
I love that guy.
That's funny, right?
How did he keep a straight face?
He doesn't break character at all.
No, how did and this comes
because he
from,
is playing. He's acting.
Well,
right?
this comes from, I think, the last time Mississippi State, or somebody was telling me this, last time Mississippi State went to Omaha, I was like, how did Mississippi State fans afford to get to Omaha? Like, that was a big media question.
Okay.
And so this guy's being like, hey, listen, my wife's boyfriend had to sell his prosthetic leg. Like, it's a double standard because they get to hang out more.
I'm going to tell you right now, my favorite SEC fan bases are the ones that have, like, legitimate chips on their shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
And Mississippi State fans, an example of that. Good for you for sticking it to the
I agree.
national media on that.
I loved it, man. I don't know how he kept a straight face, but I loved it.
Well, I liked it, too. Speaking of keeping a straight face, we hopefully broke your straight face a little bit here and there on the program today. If you missed any part of it, you can check out the podcast. The audio version we posted here right away. We'll also ask you to share the show with your friends on Facebook and YouTube and all the other video outlets. Let the folks know we're talking about the SEC here each and every afternoon. There is a show tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I guess I'm not going to be on it, but we'll look forward to allowing you all to roll on. I'm on special assignment tomorrow, if you want to know the honest truth on that. But I'm looking forward to seeing you back again here on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live. Y'all enjoy the show tomorrow without me. See you then.